From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, Obama escalates on ISIS.
Tonight I want to speak to you about what the United States will do with our friends and allies to degrade and ultimately destroy the terrorist group known as ISIL.
In a rare primetime address, President Obama told the nation about his goals for defeating the Islamic State. The president announced that in addition to the ongoing targeted airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq, the U.S. will now likely begin bombing Islamic State strongholds in Syria.
I've made it clear that we will hunt down terrorists who threaten our country wherever they are. That means I will not hesitate to take action against ISIL in Syria as well as Iraq. This is a core principle of my presidency. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven.
America will also take concerted steps to cut off sources of funding for the Islamic State, which range from oil revenues to foreign donations. Mr. Obama also discussed the formation of an international coalition to fight ISIS.
But this is not our fight alone. American power can make a decisive difference, but we cannot do for Iraqis what they must do for themselves. Nor can we take the place of Arab partners in securing their region. And that's why I've insisted that additional U.S. action depended upon Iraqis forming an inclusive government, which they have now done in recent days. So tonight, with a new Iraqi government in place, and following consultations with allies abroad and Congress at home, I can announce that America will lead a broad coalition to roll back this terrorist threat.
In 2002, then-President George W. Bush also created an international coalition. It consisted of 68 countries, of which 20 committed more than 16,000 combat troops. Senior Obama administration officials said that members of the coalition that will assist in fighting ISIS include allies from around the globe, including the Arab world, notably Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Jordan, and Europe. Australia is already engaged in humanitarian airdrops inside Iraq, and Canada has put advisors on the ground. In his speech, President Obama again declared that the United States will not commit ground forces to the destruction of ISIS, but instead hopes that Muslim allies and the Iraqis will provide the boots-on-the-ground military strategists say are essential to defeating the Islamic State.
Question, is this the right formula to defeat the Islamic State, Pat Buchanan?
John, the president's strategy is non-credible. It's a formula for an open-ended, no-win war. Look, you're going to need, in Syria, you're going to need boots on the ground to take down ISIS. The Turks are saying we're not even going in, we're not going to help. Assad has the one army fighting against them, and we can't work with ISIS, so we're going to build an army of white hats outside the country. It is inherently non-credible. In Iraq, the Iraqi army has been routed by ISIS, the Islamic State, the Peshmerga have been routed, and where the Shia brigades and the Shia militia have done well, but they are detested and despised all across Anbar, John, and all across the Sunni areas. So what I see here is basically it's a formula for a no-win war, and the Republicans should not get aboard unless they get a credible strategy, which we do not now have.
Eleanor.
Well, this general from this armchair sees it a little differently. First of all, the Republicans are getting on board. Secondly, this is not a conventional war. This is not another Iraq or Afghanistan. This is a counterterrorism effort, and yes, it will continue into the indefinite future. The president is putting together a coalition, not the usual suspects. He's brought in other Arab countries, brought in Sunni countries, so this isn't America going in there waging a one-sided war, religious war. The no boots on the ground, you can't win if you don't put boots on the ground, but they're not going to be American boots because we don't want to be seen as another occupying force. The Peshmerga has actually managed to take back the Mosul Dam and some territory in Iraq. Turkey may not be out there helping openly, but there is some de facto cooperation. 49 of their diplomats and diplomatic personnel have been taken by ISIS. Syria, you're not going to work with Assad. Assad is going to welcome anything that hampers ISIS, but the Free Syrian Army is not going to distinguish between good guys and bad guys, and I think that's trouble for Assad as well.
Well,
I think it's tricky diplomatically, and you know, Donald Rumsfeld was the one who said there are known unknowns and unknown unknowns, and there's lots of moving parts here, lots of things that can go wrong. By going into Syria, we may end up owning that civil war. That's not good news. But if the alternative is doing nothing, that was not an acceptable alternative.
Well, there was some thinking earlier that Syria would not be on board. However, listen to this. Syrian Deputy Foreign Minister Faisal Mekdad says Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad is also an enemy of ISIS and would be willing to cooperate in any military action against the terror group. Here it is.
We shall cooperate with any country that's combating the menace of terrorism. And when it comes to combating ISIS, then we have no reservations whatsoever to work together with any real force that wants to eliminate this menace. Because now the United States and Syria are facing the same enemy.
Question, is it feasible that the U.S. would team with Syria in the fight against ISIS? I ask you, Tom.
In military terms, it's feasible, but I don't think it should be feasible, because if the United States was to engage with Assad, what you would be doing would be to be a partner with a genocidal dictator. I mean, that sounds like rhetoric, but the level of civilian casualties that the Assad regime has inflicted through barrel bombs and chemical gas and starvation is grotesque. And the United States cannot be a counterpart to that at a moral level, but also at a political level, where the United States to become a counterpart to that, we would lose any credibility that we have, and Pat actually mentions this in terms of Anbar and Deir ez-Zor and Raqqa, with Sunni tribes and basic Sunni civilians, because we would be associated with murder.
Didn't Churchill partner with Stalin?
He did, but in this case, if we are talking about a political solution, which I think we would all agree on, you cannot do that if you simply engage with someone who is massacring Sunnis. Sunni disenfranchisement does not get resolved, quite frankly, by killing them.
This may force Assad to the peace table.
Yeah, but see that is where you can have
a role for diplomacy.
I take a much more lenient view on Assad. Did you know how many times he's visited with the leader of Saudi Arabia in Saudi Arabia, and how many times the Saudi Arabian head of Saudi Arabia, what is he called?
King Abdullah.
Yeah, Abdullah visited with Assad in Syria. Those visitations. In other words, you know, if we're going to demonize Assad, as a lot of people do, people ought to cool it and look at the record of what he is and what he's had to deal with the civil war. You care to speak to either that or anything relating to the question?
Yeah, look, I have no problem with establishing some kind of relationship at this point with Assad of Syria. We need him at this stage of the game, but let's not for a second try and whitewash who this man is. He is not only a thug, but he is a thug of unbelievable proportions, and he's killed an awful lot of people. That is generally not the people that we would try and identify with in the Middle East, because that will hurt us all the way around. If there's one thing I do know about the Saudis, whatever meetings he's had with Assad, the King of Saudi Arabia and the Saudi leadership are not happy with Assad. So this is just.
Well, they've gone through their cycles of dislike and liking each other.
John, talk about troops on the ground. The Americans aren't going to put them in there. The Turks say we're not going to put them in there. No NATO ally has offered troops on the ground. No Arab nation has offered troops on the ground.
The Saudis are going to train. The Saudis are going to train the Syrian fighters.
Hasn't won a battle, and Obama says they're a bunch of pharmacists, farmers, and doctors.
Okay, Obama's approval.
They've trained to be something else by now.
Excuse me. Obama's approval sinks on Tuesday, one day before President Obama's speech outlining the U.S. fight against ISIS. The president's approval rating was at 42%. One day after his ISIS speech, according to Gallup, his approval rating sank to 41%. His disapproval rating rose from 52% before the speech to 54% after the speech. Question, According to Nielsen, 32 million viewers saw the speech. Why did Obama's approval ratings drop in the Gallup tracking? Is it because he was too hawkish, too dovish, or what? Mark Zuckerman.
Well, I mean, he's lost so much credibility amongst Americans in terms of his foreign policy. I don't think we've lived with anybody with that kind of record of failure as far as the American public sees it. So I think they're very nervous about what he's going to be leading the country into. And frankly, the more he goes in one direction, a lot of other Americans are going to go in a different direction.
Americans hate ISIS, John, but they are really skeptical of plunging into another war in the Middle East, I can tell you, and they're going to get more so. Obama was bounced into this thing by 2 videos. He called it Syria somebody else's civil war a couple of months ago. Now we're in the middle of it because of these 2 videos?
It's more than the videos. Yes, it's our allies in the region who see this as an emerging threat and a growing threat.
Why won't they send troops?
President had. Why won't they send troops?
Yeah.
There are troops on the ground with the Peshmerga, the Free Syrian Army. The door with Turkey has not yet been closed. And I don't think we're at the stage of sending in troops yet anyway.
I'll have to tell you what the biggest thing we have to worry about. Mission creep.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
You know what that means?
Yeah. We're going to have to win the war for them.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to win it.
It's counterterrorism,
does anyone think that the action is going to
endless.
stop the way it was outlined by President Obama in his address this week?
It can't work if he doesn't change the strategy.
And the mission creep is impossible to predict where it goes.
He's got the right strategy, and he's forcing other people who are actually threatened by ISIS more than this country
Let's see if we
to
can
step up.
squeeze this in. Excuse me. Exit question: assign a rating 1 to 10 on President Obama's address. Pat Buchanan.
I think it was a good address as an address, but when you study
Give me
the
a number.
strategy, you study that it's a D for content.
A number, not a letter, a number.
A D, a number?
On the whole
9
address.
out of 10? Okay.
Stop.
It's an 8 out of 10 for a speech, just listening to it.
Okay, good. 8 out of 10.
I
Let's
would
go.
say it's 9 out of 10. But the American public is nervous. They see the Ebola threat. They read headlines. It feels like the world is coming apart. They're not sure he can put it back together.
7 out of 10 on tone. I thought it was strong on that, but in substance, 3 or 4 because, as you say, the coalition hasn't materialized, and there's a real avenue there that has to be addressed because America can't.
I agree with that.
Just around one number instead of this.
I would give him an 8 in terms of rhetoric.
I would give him a 9.5.
Just outstanding, huh?
I thought it was outstanding. I mean, he had to keep it together. He had to keep it tight. Didn't answer all the questions, but
You can't
don't forget the McLaughlin Group has its own website, and you can watch this program or earlier programs on the web at any time from anywhere in the world at McLaughlin.com. Could anything be simpler? McLaughlin.com or more rewarding? What do you think of that? 9.5, is that what I gave him?
Yeah, I mean, I first heard it, I said it's a pretty good speech, and then you kept looking at it and saying, where in the hell? I mean, he just is marching us into an open-ended thing. He doesn't know how it's going to end. Nobody does.
When we come back.
Of course it's open-ended because terrorism is out there. It's an ideology. We're going to be fighting this, well into the next president's, future president's terms.
Well, not just that it's open-ended, it's that the country does not have any great confidence in him when it comes to foreign policy.